Hey, howdy, and a
What
big
did you
welcome
just?
back to Clem Hawks, folks. I'm Yak, he is Clem Hawks, and we are ready to take you through a little post-race, post-day after kind of discussion here following the race that was to get us to the Final Four for this upcoming weekend. Clem, just quickly though, before we get into too much NASCAR talk coming up into the Final Four, just a quick thought on Chastain's finish last night. I mean, it's the most talked about thing I've seen in NASCAR. Obviously, maybe because of how big of a moment it was, too, but also how crazy it was. Just for those of us who didn't watch your video last night, how, how crazy was it to watch that happen live and then still have a day to digest it and still be blown away by it?
Well, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is that even a day later, it's still incredibly talked about all over not only NASCAR but all over sports, which is I think really good. But also, a lot of talk has been like, is it like should we make a rule that prohibits this from ever happening again? And I think that is where it gets really interesting. I would say no. I think that this was a great move by Chastain to get into the playoffs or the championship. It was a desperate move. It required a desperate move. I don't know. He needed to do it. He did it. He executed it. And the one time that it works is when people want to change it. So we can talk about that maybe a little bit later, but so many cool camera angles coming out of this that show the move. So many cool moments from other drivers and other perspectives that I think have really hyped this up. And I think it was a super cool move. All of NASCAR is stunned by it still, I think. So he's going to be talked about all week. But then obviously going into the championship, I think this made him a favorite for that move. And he'll go down in history a long time because of that.
So, I know you make no bones of who your favorite driver is. He's in the Final Four. Expectations going into the weekend for Chase Elliott, who I know you're pretty hyped up that he's winning another championship, but are we coming down to earth a little bit in this video to talk about realistic expectations, or is he taking it the whole way for you?
Well, see, I I'm not a fan of the playoff format that it is. You probably don't know really what the playoff format is, but for the NASCAR fans who do, I am not a fan of it because the best driver clearly does not win the championship most times. Going into the final four, you have a 25% chance of winning, right? Basically, if you finish in front of the other three cars, you win. That means you could finish first and win. You could finish 15th and win, or you could finish 32nd, 33rd, 34th, and 35th, and the 32nd place driver wins. So the best driver doesn't always win the championship. And it's been clear the last couple of years as well, where Kevin Harvick won 9 races last 2 years ago or 3 years ago or whatever, didn't win the championship. And I don't think that was 2020 because of the shortened year. It might have been 2019 then. Um, but it's like that's the problem. The best driver should win the championship theoretically, and that's not the case in NASCAR all the time. So Chase Elliott, going back to your question, Chase Elliott is the best driver in NASCAR. Period. He's won the most races. He's gained the most points. He's had a pretty bad playoffs. Uh, so maybe the momentum has shifted to somebody else, but realistically, he is the best driver this season. He should win the championship. Now, going into expectations for the weekend, they've said that he has done better. Like he's prepared this car better than he has the other weeks. And I even touched on it in yesterday's video that really he's had some bad finishes that don't result in where he's run the entire race. A pit stop strategy yesterday put him in 11th. A bad timely caution put him in 14th last week. He got spun at the Roval 3 weeks ago. Should have probably won that race. Ended up like 30th. So really his finishes haven't shown what he's capable of doing. But either way, it comes down to Phoenix, one race, and he should win the championship. But really, it's about did he set up the right car for one race? I don't like that. He would have blown away everybody if the points were back what they were, years and years ago before this playoff format. But I think Chase Elliott's got a really good chance at winning. 25%, but he's got a good car. He's had a good year. I expect high things from him. He's won here before at Phoenix to win the championship. So, big things.
And I guess my other question is just from a atmosphere perspective, is Phoenix going to be the end all be all that it should be for the championship, or do you think, I don't know how races line up for who gets the final race of the year, but do you think the race being at Phoenix is going to be an absolutely electric phenomenon? Like, as a Canadian who is pretty familiar with like Daytona and Talladega, um, is Phoenix going to be what it's built up to be for a championship?
I mean, if we look at the past years, I don't think. I mean, clearly any NASCAR fan I think would agree with me and say no. Miami Homestead is where it has always been, and that was a one-time race a year. It was, I think, well, maybe they raced there twice a few times, but I think for the most part, it was the last race of the season, the championship race. They went there one time. Whereas now Phoenix, just with the TV deal and the way that the speedways are owned, and they moved it to Phoenix, uh, really stupid in my opinion. It's just like you race there in the spring,
Yep.
so you people are already going to pick one race. If a race date has two races, they usually will go to one or the other, unless you're like a diehard NASCAR fan, which I think does have its purpose, but probably not for this specific instance. So they're going to pick the championship race. So why even go to the spring? And then if you're talking about from a driver perspective, like the race in the spring is going to be pretty much the same as it is in the championship because it's the desert. It doesn't change much, you know? So I just don't like them running two races there in the same year. And then also Phoenix, like you need cautions. Like you need restarts to create drama because there's this thing called the dog leg. It's a really, really wide part of the track where you can like fan out like 6, 7, 8 wide. And like that's super, super exciting. But you need those restarts to create that excitement. Whereas at Homestead, the track was so old and like you could run up against the wall, you could run down low, depending on your tires, depending on your setup. Like you could change lines and it would be exciting.
Yep.
Phoenix is pretty boring. It's like one lane around the track. There's passing opportunities, sure, and his tires wear and whatever, but it's not the same as Miami Homestead. It's not the same as other tracks. And like you're gonna need those cautions, otherwise it's just gonna be a long green flag run and maybe a guy catches another guy, passes him for the lead a few times. It's not gonna be what it could have been at Miami Homestead, for example. I'm not a fan of it being at Phoenix.
So if not Chase Elliott on the weekend, who is it?
Probably Christopher Bell. Christopher Bell's like he's like my third favorite driver, but I like Martin Truex. So I got Chase Elliott as my favorite driver. He's my Chevy driver too. I like Chevy. Ryan Blaney's my second favorite driver. He's my Ford driver. And then I go back and forth between Christopher Bell and Martin Truex Jr. as my Toyota driver. So, I mean, he's had a heck of a playoffs. Had to win two races to get into the championship. He was backed up against the wall, must win. He did. So, got to be Chase, and then Christopher Bell.
So in that you leave out Logano and of course Chastain. Overall, if you had to kind of just as we're finishing up here, I'm gonna really put you on the spot here and make you pick that final day or final race of horse betting there, where you pick the exacta or whatever it's called, where you go 1, 2, 3, 4. How's it finishing up in Phoenix this weekend?
I mean, I want to say Chase Elliott wins because he's by far the best driver of the four, and he's been good at Phoenix before. I believe they'll pull something out, but Logano and Chastain are so aggressive that they're not going to be afraid to move people out of the way. I feel like Logano's just not very good at Phoenix, so unless he brought something completely different, he's just not going to be a super contender. He might finish fifth or sixth or seventh, but he's not going to contend for the lead unless he just starts bumping people out of the way. Same with Chastain. I think he's shown a lot of speed lately, but he could be a guy who just starts bumping people out of the way. I mean, I'll touch on that in a second, but Christopher Bell's got a lot of momentum, so it really could go any of the four. If I had to pick, back against the wall, like I would probably say Chastain wins it because of his aggression. Um, just like he's not afraid to bump people, crash people. He's done it all year. And that's what scares me is like he could just bump anybody out of the way with 2 laps to go, wreck him intentionally, whatever. He'll get the win, and he'll do that. But from a strictly racing professional driver standpoint, Chase Elliott should walk away with it, in my opinion. Even though he's not had a great playoffs, I think that he's just better than all 4 of these guys at this track, and I think he runs away with it. But if I had to bet money on it, I bet Chastain probably wins.
So if it's Chastain up top, who's second?
Probably Chase Elliott, then Christopher Bell and Logano.
Okay, there we go. As we finish up, one last stupid question for you. I think that's a Clemson Tigers blanket you're leaning on, yeah? How
Yeah,
excited are you for the game on Saturday?
against Notre Dame,
Yeah?
they're gonna beat them pretty badly. I think. I don't know. They got a bye week last week. They're gonna beat them pretty badly. They're gonna come out because like they almost lost against Syracuse. They had to put in their backup quarterback, and I think that pretty much is gonna light a fire under them and say, "Oh, we can't do that again." But I think they'll walk away with it pretty easily.
All right, he's Clem. I'm Yak. This has been your NASCAR little update here after a day to kind of relive everything that happened yesterday and get set for what's going to be a crazy weekend coming up. Folks, have yourself a great rest of your Monday evening. We are up on out of here. Oh, hold on. Don't say anything stupid.